Good morning, everybody. Consider, please, listeners, consider yourself as the elite of FIABCI. That's why you're not so many. But I'm convinced that with the speakers we have today and the work we are going today, this room will not have enough seats in the future if you spread out what's going on here. First of all, we have just exactly 2 hours, and I will be very short with the introduction to give the speakers as much time as possible to present themselves. They have prepared their presentations, and I think if you have any questions in between, if it's not a co-speech, go ahead, and I hope that all the speakers accept that to interrupt themselves for a short moment for a question in between. Is that okay, everybody? Good. Thank you very much. I will do the introduction of all the speakers very short. I have to be humble enough to say that I'm really honored to announce them. You have outstanding personalities of speakers today, starting with Ronald Goss. And if I read you his curriculum in English, I think it will take more time than his presentation. So I won't do that, but I tell you, I'm really, really, really happy, Ronald, that you took the time to prepare yourself. And before I do any further remarks, we could do that afterwards. I will ask you kindly to get into your into the first presentation, risk management, how managers can protect themselves from potential dangers. This is a very big subject in the country I come from. The manager, as we call it, is always with one foot in prison and the other in bankruptcy. Dear Ronald, take all the time you need, but not over 15 minutes.
That certainly is not very encouraging to know one foot's in precarious positions. It's my pleasure to be participating in the FIABCI International Congress and the Managers Forum. My name is Ron Goss. I was the 2011 president of the Institute of Real Estate Management, or IREM for short. IREM is a long-time principal member of FIABCI. And if you're not familiar with IREM, IREM's focus is exclusively on real estate, property, and asset management. We address all types of property management, office buildings, shopping centers, retail apartment buildings, condominiums, and community associations. And we all deal with those property types through the lens of the property manager. So from the perspective of IREM, IREM sees property management as a true profession. And as part of our mission is to upgrade continually and to enhance the status of property management as a profession to help management companies be successful in what they do. That is our goal. So I'm here today to speak to you about the important topic, as Michael has said, risk management, and how you can protect your company and how you can run the properties that you manage as well. So during my talk today, I'm specifically going to discuss... No, I'm fine, thank you. I just drink it out of the bottle, that's fine, I don't need the glass. Okay, thank you. I'm going to discuss the property management business in the United States. Our responsibility as professional managers to really assess and manage risk as it impacts, first of all, our businesses as well as the properties that we manage. And I'm going to provide an overview of IREM's 5-step method for really approaching risk management. And in closing, I'm going to share with you IREM's 10 risk management tips. But before I begin, let me tell you something about my company. RPM Management Company in Little Rock, Arkansas. We are a full-service real estate company, and we break up our divisions in what we call profit centers. We have single-family dwelling profit center of about 350 houses that we manage. We also have a division for management and leasing of apartment complexes, commercial, office buildings, retail centers, and in another part of our profit center. And then another section we have condominiums, and we have property owner associations. And then we have a maintenance division as well as one of our profit centers. We have one corporate office, but we work geographically within Arkansas. All our properties that we manage in third party as well as what we own is in Arkansas. So now that you know something about my company, let me tell you a little bit about property management business in the United States. According to census in the U.S. government, there are 32,000 property management companies, plus another 13,500 full-service real estate companies that provide management services, like our company. So totally, there's about 45,000 management companies that do property management total in the United States. But what's interesting is that totally they generate management fees of 30 billion American dollars. So property management in the United States is big business. But as you probably all know, as you have a big business, you also have big risk involved in what you do. After all, it's inevitable that in all business environments, you're going to have some type of a risk involvement. So, in fact, I guess you could say that risk and being involved in managing those risks play a big part in how companies really create the profits as well as the value of the assets that you manage. And this is especially true in the business of real estate management, where risks exist at a great number of levels. So there are kinds of risks associated with being an employer and with running a business. These are risks that are associated with running a property management company, risks that have to be managed and be managed effectively. And there are, of course, the risks that are associated with the properties that we manage and with those who live, work, shop, play, and do business within those properties that we manage. As professional, experienced real estate managers, we have to address the risks that we face in not only our companies, but also within the properties that we manage. So, to start with, what is risk management? We view risk management as a systematic process of identifying those potential risks, evaluating their likelihood that they will occur, and deciding how best we're going to handle those risks. As a rule, our goal is to mitigate our exposure to those risks in a way that, as I said before, is more efficient and more effective. Risk management has always been a critical component of what we do in our businesses. But I can tell you, as of September the 11th, 2001, that changed forever how we look and how we view risks. All of a sudden, risk management became center stage. Guarding against and preparing for the unthinkable became center stage. Insurance rates soared, and how we looked at security within our properties became a very important part of what we did. Not long after September 11th, Hurricane Katrina hit, And all of a sudden, the definition of unpredictable was altered. We viewed things differently than we had before. The demand for managers and the demand for those managers that could deal with risk management became center stage and very important as far as our owners were concerned. There are essentially 4 strategies that we view for managing risks. The first, of course, is quite obvious when we say, let's just avoid it. And I guess the best example I can use, a simple example, is a swimming pool. If you have a swimming pool in one of your buildings, you recognize that some of the risks may be something as simple as a slip and fall, but it also may be an accidental drowning. The best way to, in the first step, is to avoid it, is just do away with the pool, not have a pool in those buildings. And that's a pretty simple explanation for that. Secondly, is to control the risk. Using the same example of a swimming pool, you take down the diving board and you remove it completely because a lot of the accidents occur because of a diving board. So you're controlling that risk. Or you put up signs that warn against wet areas and areas that somebody may fall. That, again, is controlling the risk. We also think perhaps in those properties that we manage that have swimming pools that we limit the hours that it's accessible. Therefore, we can have somebody watching the individuals that are within the pool. The third strategy is retention, and that is basically qualified as accepting that risk. Usually, that's associated with those things that are unlikely to occur, those things that will have minimal loss type of reporting loss or impact on the property. And finally, the transfer of risks. Transfer of risk basically is referring to insurance. Now, while it does not completely, insurance transferring the risk from the company and from the owners, but it does not prevent the losses from occurring, obviously, but it does offer financial protection in case the event does happen. So that in itself is the way a lot of our properties making sure, and we're going to cover a little bit later about what some of the important parts of your insurance coverage are concerned. So as far as the management company is concerned, there are so many important things that you've got to deal with in protecting your company. Protecting the company against outside lawsuits, protecting the assets that the company manages, because there's so many things within the company that are important to your sustainability of the company. The records that you keep for your tenants and your residents as well as your owners are confidential records and have to be protected and have to be put in a secure position so that they do not get out on the internet, so that they will be accessible to other people as well. It's unfortunate that you have to think about it, but you also have to protect yourself and make sure that you manage the risk of employee dishonesty. It's something that is not a pleasant thought to think about, but you do have to consider the possibility of that happening. Emergency procedures in case something were to happen that you would have to vacate the building. You have to be able to put your company in a position to vacate, to be able to protect your property and protect the building itself. The management agreement covers so much of these things. The agreement that you have with the owners protects you, protects the owner as well. So it's a document, and we say within our commercial leases anyway, and then our commercial leases are very long. And sometimes they're 10 to 15 pages long, and we say that those documents incorporate all the mistakes that we've ever made within our business, and that we have put them in this lease to protect ourselves as well as others. When it comes to the management of properties, which is the second part of risk management, the primary goal that we have is to operate the property in accordance with the goals and the opportunities and the objectives of the owner. That's where we operate from. And typically, these goals and these objectives revolve around increasing the value of the asset. More and more investors are turning to professional property managers and management companies that include this risk management type menu of services, if you will, to protect their asset and to increase the profitability of that asset. So how do we do this? We do it two ways. We do it by effectively increasing our revenues and by also minimizing our operating costs. On the revenue side, how do we increase our revenues? Well, we do that by attracting a higher level or quality of tenants. And we do that by upgrading the property and bringing people in that will be a higher quality of tenant. We also realize that the shorter the vacancy cycle is, the more money and profitability that property can obtain. So we try to shorten that vacancy cycle. We also increase our revenues by having tighter rent collection procedures, that we make sure that we have a procedure in place that will make sure the rents come in a timely fashion. And finally, in increasing the revenue aspect of it, we want to make sure that we have priced the property or priced the product properly, that it's marketable and it's within areas of marketing. On the operations side, we know that by understanding and controlling the risks that we have in facing us, that we can lower maintenance and repair costs, that we have a capability of controlling our utilities and our energy expenses. And we realize also that we can mitigate our risk and avoid a lot of costly legal procedures that we have to face. And we're always keeping in mind that the value of the investment in the real estate is found in the cash flow, that every increase in revenue and every decrease in expenses makes a difference in the value of that property. That cash flow determines what the value of that property is going to be. So the way to manage risk at a property can directly affect both the revenue and the expense side, and thus impacts the value. Now, the risk that we have to manage on the side of the property, certainly the safety of the property itself, the integrity of the structures itself is important that we have to take care of. In addition to that, we've got any crime or any problems that may be occurring on the site that may impact the reputation of that property. We found in our experience that a good reputation is sometimes difficult to build up. But when you obtain a bad reputation as far as the occupancy is concerned, it goes down pretty quickly. So it's very important that that risk is managed very effectively and very efficiently. The environment of that property is so important as far as how the upkeep of the apartments, how the upkeep of the grounds, how the upkeep of your commercial area and how attractive it is, and how the air quality and everything is controlled to make sure that the tenants are comfortable. We're finding more and more that our tenants in our office buildings are expecting green, are expecting the lighting, expecting the air quality, and all those things are important. And our leasing is improved by what we do in that regard. We also have to make sure that we're prepared for our properties for any natural events and any natural catastrophes that may occur as far as evacuation, as far as everything else is concerned as we go forward. The insurance and the property insurance is so important. Especially in our apartments, we really need to make sure that we read very carefully and make sure that our insurance coverage for our properties is very explicit and detailed. We also have to make sure that the contractors that work on our properties are fully covered and insured, because if something were to happen and they were independent contractors were hurt, that comes back on our insurance, so we don't want that to happen. So we want to make sure that the workman's compensation, the general liability, and the insurance coverage that they're supposed to have, that they're covered. We also need to make sure that the tenants and our residents are properly insured as far as the contents of their personal property is concerned. And finally, as far as the insurance is concerned, when claims do occur, we have to make sure we have the claims management process in place so that we will know that as we go forward with our insurance claims, that we have in place a way of monitoring what's going on within our claims. For both your company and your property, IREM has identified 5 steps, and it's a 5-step method that can be used to assess your risk. Step number one is you've got to acknowledge and identify those risks. Risks exist. Let's face it, stuff happens all the time, and no matter how prepared you are, it's still going to happen. The smart property manager assesses all properties for risk by doing a thorough walkthrough of those properties, targeting those specific areas that, such as personal property, potential threats from natural disaster, financial, all those different things that make up an analysis of those properties, and coming up with a list of those risks and taking account what kind of maintenance system you can put into place and preventive maintenance system you can put into place to deal with those risks beforehand. Think not about just the property itself, but where it's located, and both geographically and in terms of the immediate surroundings and how you deal with all of that. So step two is to evaluate and prioritize those lists that you have made as far as potential risks are concerned. So let's say, for example, the property is known in the area that you're living in or the property is located in for severe winter storms. You have to prepare for that when it comes around. You have to make sure you have all the details and all the components in place to deal with those severe weather storms. These roll all into a development of a management plan, a risk management plan, on how you're going to deal with all these problems. You share that with the people that work for you so they'll be aware of what's going to happen in certain situations. Finally, like everything else, things change. You've got to evaluate, you've got to look at this plan on a regular basis and update it to make sure that it's updated and make sure that it's current. And it's also very important as part of your five-step plan. I want to offer you IREM's 10 management tips as far as risk management is concerned. They're listed on the screen, and I won't take the time to read those. Well, I may need to do that so they can be translated, right? Probably so. Treat insurance costs as controllable expense. Read insurance policies carefully, even in the fine print. Implement risk management inspections. Have an emergency preparedness plan for the company and each property. Make tenants and residents aware of their role in managing risks. Adopt measures to minimize lawsuits. Pay attention to building access. Regard other stakeholders as risk management partners. Acknowledge that employees are capable of illegal acts and act accordingly, and be prepared for anything and everything to happen. So before I leave the podium, let me say a few words about the Institute of Real Estate Management. IREM is headquartered in Chicago and is truly a global network. As I said, for a long period of time, we have been principal members of FIABCI. It's created by professionals based on what we have in common and how we can grow individually and working collaboratively. Here in Russia, we have IREM Russia chapter, and we deliver our education through both the Russian Guild of Realtors and the Russian Guild of Managers and Developers. Courses are predominantly in Moscow as well as St. Petersburg. We look forward to the collaboration with property managers in Russia, and we all strive to increase our business success and elevate the role of property managers. IREM supports the real estate management profession by providing meaningful, relevant resources. One example of that is the document that is the best practices for real estate management services. It presents 54 practices for running your real estate management company and serving your clients. And if you give me your business card when all this session is over, then we will electronically send that to you so that you will be able to have access to that. Whether you've already got a company in place and you want to improve it or you're starting a new management company, I think that it will be able to help you. If you want to learn more, go to our website, irem.org, or talk with me after the meetings or my colleague, Leah Misman. And as I close, I'd like to invite you to our Fall Leadership Conference, which is going to take place October 16th through the 20th of this year in New Orleans, Louisiana. It's 4 days filled with keynote speakers, in-depth education sessions, and many opportunities to network with property managers not only within the states but internationally as well. So thank you for your attention and giving me the opportunity to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before you leave, allow me one short question. That was more or less the hard facts. The most dangerous risk in my company for the last 40 years I run when my mainly condominium owners tried to blackmail us. They do a wrong decision. It costs a hell of a lot of money. We warned them in before. And afterwards, when everybody can see that the damage is there, they go to the management company and say, well, you have an insurance. You pay for that. And we say, no. They say, next time, we are not going to give you the contract again. So bribing for the damage of others. No, not bribing. Blackmailing for the, being blackmailed for the loss and the damage of others is one of our very big problems. Could you say one word to that?
Well, quite frankly, we've never been blackmailed like that before, so
Happy
I don't know. But typically, the documents, and I know that's different in every country, but the documents that rule the condominium associations and the POAs, property owners associations, are the things that we adhere to. If it says you need 2/3 vote in order to pass an assessment or in order to do whatever you do, then that's what we do. The board of directors is who we work for, and the board of directors make the decisions. We always try to put ourselves between the board of directors and the owners of the property, but typically we do what the board of directors tells us to do, which lessens our exposure and our liability.
Okay. See, this is one of the lots of do's and don'ts we have to discuss in our World Council meetings. I would like to tell you all that Elena Ivankina is Dr. Elena Ivankina, Vice President of the World Council of Managers, is here. Thank you very much, Elena, to be with us. Are there any other questions to Ronald that you would like to ask right now? If not, we are going to move on. The next speaker will be Togrul Gonden, head of the retail property management of John Lang LaSalle. Challenges of managing in Russia. He has 3 backgrounds of nations, Turkish, German, and now he becomes more and more sneaking into the Russian one. Togrul, I don't tell all the details of your life. The same thing, I will give you more time to present yourself. It's much more easy. Please, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody, although it's not that morning anymore. Thank you very much for having the opportunity to speak here, and I'm very honored, to be honest, to sit on the same table with such gurus as Ronald, because my experience compared with his is definitely limited. So I'm very honored to be here and to sit at the same table. A few words about myself. As Michael already mentioned, I'm responsible for the property management business of Jones Lang LaSalle in Russia. We are currently only focused on retail. We don't do offices yet. A few words about myself. I'm based in Moscow. This is my 3rd station for Jones Lang LaSalle. Let's put it this way. I started off in Germany in the Berlin and the Munich offices, and then I transferred to Istanbul, to the Turkey office of Jones Lang LaSalle. And finally, 2.5 years ago, I transferred to the Moscow office. So I think I'm in a position to compare the 3 countries and compare the specifics of each country. I think it's a very good coincidence that I speak after Ronald, because he was referring to the huge business in the US. Compared to that, the property management business in Russia is tiny, tiny, tiny. And we've started our business approximately 2.5 years ago, and so did most of our competitors. So we can say that the third-party professional property management in Russia is maybe 2.5, 3 years old. That's it. Since we are in Russia, I think it's a good topic to talk about the challenges of managing in Russia. I'm aware that the title is very, very cliche, think global, act local, you hear it a lot. But actually, when I came here, what most potential clients told me in the meetings were, what you learned in Germany, forget about it. This is a different world. Everything is different here. You have to do everything in a different way. The funny thing is the same thing they told me in Turkey. All my clients said, Turkey, different world. Forget it. It's not Germany. Everything is different. My opinion is it's not different. It's very, very similar. Property management business in the world is very similar. There are specifics that you have to adapt to, but the essential of successful management is everywhere the same. Sorry to disappoint all the people that say otherwise. Because Russia is not the moon. You know, Western Europe is the earth and Russia is the moon. That's not the case. Yeah? I've been given 15 minutes to talk. I could probably talk an hour about the challenges, but for 15 minutes I had to group the challenges, let's put it this way. I grouped them into personnel, service providers, and owners. First, a few facts about Russia from our business point of view. I'm not only talking about property management in Russia, I'm talking about outsourcing idea in Russia. It's still very much in its infancy. We're talking about huge global outsourced facility management contracts for corporates in the US. That's simply unthinkable in Russia. There's no such trust. No one would ever trust to outsource such a big part of their business to another company. And that's the situation right now in Russia. When it comes to property management, I have to admit that office property management is much more advanced than the retail property management. I consider retail property management far more complicated, and that might be one of the reasons why it's not as advanced as the office property management. We have a lack of foreign investors. There are not many, to be honest. There were more before the crisis. After the crisis, everyone sort of started to refocus on the core markets and abandoned Russia. Now the interest is increasing again, but still there is a huge lack of foreign investors. The market is very much driven by private entrepreneurs, by family holdings, by oligarchs, simply. So they have extensive personnel, and when they develop something and they don't have another project to develop, what they do, they use this personnel to manage their properties. And that's the situation we have. Vast majority of shopping centers in Russia are managed in-house. What is the reasons for this? I think there are many reasons. First of all, there's the lack of experience. They have no case study. They haven't had the experience with working with professional outsourced companies. There's a huge lack of trust. In the end, they create affiliated property management companies that serve them, and that's another source of additional income for them. So in most cases, it's against their interest to outsource the property management. And last but not least, there is a huge lack of understanding what is facility management, what is property management, what is asset management. They don't really understand, most of them, of course, they don't really understand where facility management starts, where it ends, and where property management starts. I personally know not more than 10 shopping centers in the whole of Russia that is professionally managed by outsourced property management companies. I'm sure there are people that will say, no, there is this company, that company, but they're all affiliated to the owners. So I don't know more than 10 shopping centers, to be honest. When it comes to the first challenge, we're talking about personnel. And I call it the vicious circle because all of these things that I'm going to show on the slide are interconnected and dependent on each other. First, limited entry of know-how. We talked about lack of foreign investors, et cetera, of professional companies that are in the market, et cetera. So naturally, there is a limited external entry of know-how into the market. We have very few institutional investors. You have to keep in mind that a lot of these developers, their core business was not real estate in the history, in the past. They're coming from the oil and gas industry, they're coming from the mining industry, they're coming from the automotive industry and start developing real estate, simply because shopping centers is in. Yeah? there is no IT tools, not that I'm aware of. We, as Johnson & LaSalle, have invested heavily. We spent $350,000 in a software that is based on Microsoft that we have developed in accordance to our needs. And apart from that, there might be some other software in other companies, but I'm simply not aware of them. So there's very limited use of these tools. As I said, the industry is very, very young. There are very few players, and to be honest, there is only one practical property management school in Russia for the last 10 years, and that is simply IKEA. The mega malls, they have 14 mega malls in Russia, and I consider them as the only practical property management school in Russia. And you will see in all of the other market players, you will see ex-IKEA people working. But it's simply not enough. One school in the market is simply not enough, because IKEA has their own ways of doing things, and other companies have different ways of doing things. There are no industry standards as such. There's very limited history of shopping centers. You have to be aware that this is not a history of 20, 30 years of shopping center. I mean, the first shopping centers, true shopping centers in Russia, they were maybe developed 10, 12 years ago. So we're only talking about roughly the third generation of shopping centers, which is, of course, has an impact on the market. Still, very strong in-house mentality. I was referring to that. Scarce foreign investment for the time being. I hope this will pick up in the next few years. But I call it the vicious circle because you have less institutional investors, you have less know-how in the market, you have less foreign investment, you have less entry of external know-how, you have less usage of IT tools, you have less opportunities to develop your reporting system, etc., etc. So they're all interconnected. And a Russian developer that is not institutional, they don't have to use the software. Why? They don't have to. Who are they reporting to? Who do they have to prove their performance? To no one, only to themselves. So that's a huge thing, avoiding this experience and know-how to be developed. And in the end of this vicious circle, it all ends up in one result, that there's limited trained personnel in the market. So one of our biggest challenge here is find the right personnel and to train them in the right way. And I have to say, I'm recruiting a lot of people from IKEA, yeah, because I mentioned it's one of the only schools in this market. But, you know, IKEA was in-house. Again, it's a very different strategy if you manage in-house or if you manage for a third party. The next challenge, service providers, I have to differentiate though, because Moscow and St. Petersburg are very, very advanced, let's say, in most of the services that need to be provided in shopping centers, but not so much in the regions. When we talk about Krasnodar, about Kazan, about Yekaterinburg, then the picture is very, very different. And that impacts our work as well, because we are obliged to provide a good service to our clients. But if that service is not on that level from our service providers, we have the same problem. We sit in the same boat that I mentioned. So staff turnovers, surprisingly to me, are extremely high in Russia. I mean, I've seen higher turnovers in Turkey than in Germany, but when I came here, I was very surprised how high the staff turnovers are. A staff turnover of 20% per annum for a security cleaning company is absolutely normal. It's absolutely normal. Even with 30%, you don't start saying this is a bad company, because this is just the standard in the market. The problem is you start training them, and the next day the guys you trained, they're simply gone. So you train them again, and they're gone again. So this is a circle, and that needs a lot of attention and needs a lot of energy and effort. Marketing is, sorry to say, it's just not on the level yet as in other Western European countries, especially when we talk about creative agencies. That's why we end up most of the times, to be honest, to work with creative agencies that are based in London, which is not ideal. These people don't speak Russian, they don't understand the Russian market, the Russian mentality, and then they're trying to produce something that fits into our market, which is not always easy. Of course, we would have prepared to work with more creative agencies and marketing agencies in Russia, but sometimes it's just not possible, especially in regions like Kazan and Krasnodar. That's a funny story. God. When I came to Russia, I saw the first openings of shopping centers, and they opened with like 50% of occupancy. I was, guys, how can you open the shopping center with 50% occupancy? How does that work? And they say, well, that's a Russian opening. I was like, what's a Russian opening? We call it the soft opening. What's a soft opening? It's a technical opening. What's a technical opening? It's just the word for not being ready to completely open the shopping center. And that's the standard in the Russian market. I mean, it would be unthinkable in Germany to open a shopping center with less than 90% occupancy. But here it's just the norm, unfortunately. And I give the blame mostly to the owners, to the clients, to be honest, because they haven't seen the importance and the necessity to properly open a shopping center. And we have many experiences and many examples in the Russian market where there's this devilish cycle, because a tenant does not open if a neighbor doesn't open. So he waits for his neighbor, and the neighbor waits for his neighbor because he doesn't open either. So everyone is waiting for the other tenant to start fit out, but no one starts because the other one doesn't start. So what happens? The few that open, yeah, they see none of my neighbors are open, I will close again. So they close again. And then the neighbor says, oh, he closed again, so I don't start my fit out until he starts again. So what happens? 1 year, 1.5 years, the occupancy is below, I don't know, 60, 70%. And that's a huge gap in this market. I know very few companies that specialize on fit-out coordination in openings of shopping centers, and that's a huge problem. I don't know any. If anyone knows, please tell me. I don't know any shopping center that opened with above 90% occupancy in the last 2 years. What the result of this is, you need much more manpower. You need much more people to control these service providers, to control this fit-out works, to work with the marketing agencies, etc., etc. When I tell my colleagues in other countries, like, you know, I work with 30 people in the management team, they say like, wow. We in the United States, usually, you know, we work with 10 people and it's okay, it's efficient. I say, sorry, this is Russia, it doesn't work like that. And that's one of the things that I would group under Act Local, because it's definitely a Russian specific. When it comes to owners, I know very few cases in Russia where the developer, owner, investor, whatever, has a very clear exit strategy. He knows exactly what he's going to do in 5 years. That's very few cases like this I know of in Russia. There's been one case here in St. Petersburg, that's the Galleria Shopping Center, which is a great example for the market, I think. Because the developer started planning, constructed the site, opened the site, managed for 1 year, sold it after 1 year. But this plan, this strategy was exactly the same as 5 years ago. They said, we will open, we will manage for 1 year, and we will sell. So that's very clear strategy. A lot of other developers, they don't have this. They don't know if they want to sell in 2, 3, 5, 10 years, or if they want to keep it until the end of the life cycle. They simply don't know. But this is extremely important because the focus has changed. The focus changes completely if you want to sell after 1 year after opening, or if you want to use it until the end of the life cycle. At the end of the life cycle, what are you going to do? What's your strategy? You're going to keep it? You're going to revamp it? What are you going to do? And if the client doesn't know exactly what they want, it's a bit harder for property managers to fulfill their expectations. Let's put it this way. As I said before, very few institutionalized investors, they simply don't have the reporting requirements. They don't have to report on affordability ratios. Most owners and developers in Russia, they don't even know what affordability ratios are because simply they don't work with it. They don't look at the monthly sales of the tenants. But that's, for us as property managers of retail, that's the #1 indicator, how successful am I? This leads to short-term thinking. When you ask the developers, mainly in the market, what's your strategy, when you're going to sell, what are you going to do? They will tell you, well, I don't know. If I get a good offer, I will sell. If I don't get a good offer, I will not sell. And that's a bit, short-term thinking, I would call it. As I said before, real estate, for most of them, is not their core business, so the know-how is actually limited. And we have a lot of distressed assets in Russia. And the surprising thing for me is that a lot of the owners of these distressed assets, they don't know, they're not aware that they're distressed. I mean, this is a quote from an original dialogue with a potential client. I visited him in the shopping center, and I told him, Mr. X, whatever, what is your plan? What is your concept? What is your strategy? How are you going to bring this alive again, the shopping center? What are you going to do? And he tells me, what do you mean? My shopping center is great. I was like, what do you mean great? You have huge vacancy. You don't have much footfall. Don't you think we have to do something here? Well, he says, my shopping center is great. It's just the bad brokers. They don't bring me Inditex. That's why it doesn't work, but that's the only reason. So he thinks that, bringing Inditex is so easy and that the brokers in the market are so stupid that they're not able to bring Inditex to his shopping center. And he thinks that's his only problem. So first thing actually must be identifying that their assets are distressed. Guest services and marketing in general. I mean, we're living in a fast-changing world. There's a lot of competition. We need guest services to differentiate ourselves from other shopping centers. We need strong marketing, social media, community involvement, etc., etc. So there are a lot of things that we have to do and put energy and effort into to differentiate our shopping center from others. But that's simply, most of the clients, they don't understand this. They say, wow, I spent more money on that. Why should I? Guest services, who's going to use that? But it takes a lot of effort and energy to convince them that this is part of the differentiation. So that's a lot what we have to fight with. The conclusion, I talked about a lot of challenges, but it's time to talk about positive things about the Russian market. As I said before, this is only the third generation. We had the first generation with the first rum store in Moscow, then the Atrium around 2000, 2002, the second generation with Senaya, Megachimki, and now the third generation, Metropolis and Galleria. And I would say that Metropolis and Galleria, they are just on the same level as any very good shopping center in London, in Berlin, in Paris, wherever. They're very, very sophisticated shopping centers, and this is only the third generation, and this happened within 10 years. So we really have to give credit to the Russian market and the Russian players. They're very, very fast and developing. And I'm sure they will catch up very soon with the Western European markets. That basically just means basics need more attention. That's it. But we also have to say that commercial real estate education is fairly new in the market. I mean, we as Jones Lang LaSalle, we have started the first sponsored MBA degree in commercial real estate in Moscow. And this is where all our department heads in the company go and have lectures, give classes to the students. And this is the first of such kind in Russia. As I said, challenges are big. I could talk an hour with challenges, but simply the potential does outweigh these challenges. And with increasing quality of stock, like centers like Metropolis, like Galleria, it's inevitable that the service provision and the quality of property management will improve significantly. This is just the result of this. And we as property managers, we have a huge responsibility for this because we are the first generation of service providers in the market. If we do not perform, it will give us bad signal to the market and people will go in-house again. So we have a huge responsibility actually as property managers, and we also have to act as asset managers. We have to guide the clients, we have to guide the owners and tell them what's right and wrong. Just about the track record of JLL in Russia, as I said, we started approximately 2.5 years ago. We are managing a Galleria in St. Petersburg, which is owned by Morgan Stanley. We are managing the Osmol in Krasnodar, Yuzhny in Kazan, Fifth Avenue in Moscow, and we did some marketing consulting for Aura in Novosibirsk. As you can see, we have a lot of experience in the regions and only one shopping center in Moscow. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you can see, oh, the room is filled now. I'm happy. You can see one thing, and that is very important. Our forum is not yet here to present informations, but also to exchange informations. Elena, would you just give some add-ons on information, please?
Dear colleagues, dear friends, dear guests, thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words about the management of residential and commercial and industrial real estate in Russia. I cannot at all agree with our top manager from John LaSalle because I work in this market 9 years. I'm head of Faculty of Real Estate Management at Academy of National Economy, and we have now 15 programs of MBA which give the knowledge for people how to manage and how to make a concept, how to make development, and how to make the everything in the facility properties. This is basic knowledge, the assets property, facility management, and the property management. We give all these knowledges for our trainees, and most part of them are managers of big shopping centers, of office centers, and living residential area. And of course, we work very close with John LaSalle and staff of Moscow John LaSalle company. They give the lecture for our trainees. We are very thankful for them. We received a lot of knowledge from here, and we prepare special training materials for our trainees. And I think that you show very quick changes which find our real commercial real estate. That's true, because it's very, very young. I remember when first shopping center comes to Moscow, in other regions, nobody don't know about this. And until this time, 82% of investment to commercial real estate comes to Moscow. Just 18 come to other regions. And that's good because 5 years ago, 0 comes to the regions. And all the investment to commercial investment comes to Moscow. That's bad and wrong, but now it's changed. I'm happy to see new big shopping center and around all capitals of regions in Russia. And now the young generation which study at our academy, we have the bachelor degrees, we have master degrees, we have the MBA degrees and PhD degrees. The master degrees, young group, which will write now their diplomas and will show it in June, part of them work in John LaSalle company, in Colliers International company, in Knight Frank company, and big car company, and they write their diplomas at the standard of management. They write the diplomas, how to manage, what is a lot of privileges when you give the management to the outsourcing, to the special professional companies. So I think that in the future we'll find much more achievement in this field. And it's not only 40 big shopping centers in Moscow. For example, you see in Moscow it's more than 100 subway stations. Close to each is not less than 3-4 big shopping centers, and a lot of mega malls around the Moscow, everywhere. So it's much more than you have in your statistics. And I will be very happy to work in cooperation with you. We prepare a special report about the commercial real estate in Russia and in Moscow for our mayor, and we'll send it in English for you to distribute for all the FIABCI members. And I am very thankful for you, but we'll compare our figures and our statistics and work together, I hope. Thank you very much.
And I think what you said, that even in your short experience in Russia, you realize that Russian managers are fast learners, and that the third generation, as you mentioned, it's the same standard as the high standard in some countries in Western Europe. So I think Russia is part of Europe, and we are going to exchange managers crisscross in Europe. So, next thing, Alexander, it is your turn, and Alexander is president of the Guild of Managers, and he will. Oh, he's my co-moderator. Alexander, you don't have your own. You would just address some words to the listeners. Give an overview, a short overview of very short time to tell what you do as the president of the Guild of Realtors. Please.
Good afternoon to all of you. I was not announced as one of the speakers today as per the official program for this round table, for this discussion. So I will be mostly ad-libbing, improvising, but I think I would like to second some of the things that have been said, and perhaps I would also like to initiate a discussion with the audience, so relative to some of the ideas that have been expressed, and of course I would like to share with you some information about my guild. I think I would support some 80% of the statements that were made by the previous speaker, and the 20% consists of my opinion that I think the issues faced by the Russian real estate market are very similar to other places. However, these issues have a different dimension, different undertones, and their own specificities. Yes, the market is there. The market was born around 1994. This is when the first commercial real estate emerged, privately built. Some important milestones came in 1998 and 2008. 1998, for your information, was the year when Russia experienced a very difficult economic crisis, and 2008 obviously was the year when there was the financial crisis globally. There was the statement that there is no strategy. Some managers do not have a strategy, but what about our overall strategy globally? How do we deal with this worldwide crisis? What do we do with Greece and their finances? And what should our strategies be locally? Should we sell or should we wait? I think that against the backdrop of these global changes, the Russian market demonstrates a certain degree of stability. Owners are reluctant to sell their property just at any price. Banks that have a large portfolio of real estate projects were reluctant to possess that property. They did not repossess that property for one simple reason. They had confidence in Russian owners, and they had confidence, they trusted that the Russian owners would be able to deal with financial difficulties and restructure the assets in a successful manner. And our experience shows that their hopes were right. Mr. Sharapov is present here, who also represents my guild. I think he will support me. In terms of human resources and training, well, we have IREM people here. We have cooperated with Ronald's organization for several years. There is a training curriculum for professionals in this field. So we have IREM. The Guild of Managers and Developers has its own training initiatives. Then there are several institutions that also offer, with our support, various off-site modules in other countries in the form of business tours, exposure trips. We started such off-site modules in 2000, and initially our trainees would simply copy some of the practices. But some 10 years later, in 2011, 2012, whenever they go for training, they usually initiate a lot of discussion about what their specific strategy should be, or what their approach needs to be. And there is a lot of cross-pollination between them and us. There's a lot of lively exchange of information and opinions between our hosts in foreign countries and our Russian trainees. I think I would also like to support the statement that the quality of property management today is not completely up to scratch to match the expectations that exist on the part of the market players as well as potential investors. I think this is largely due to what the property owners are doing. Because when we complain about the low skills of our personnel, I would like to say that we've heard from large banks, investment firms, financial institutions, those complaints. However, in my opinion, these financial institutions are sometimes also part of the problem. Because think of the compensation of the size of the fees that a property management company can count on these days. When a budget is developed for property management, if an external property manager is brought on board, I'm not talking here about companies that are one way or another affiliated with the owner. When an external property manager is brought on board, they only focus on the direct operating costs. They do not factor in training costs and other associated costs that add value. It seems that for the property owners today, and I subscribe here to what my colleague from LaSalle said, for the property owners, occupancy is really the key today. It's their first priority. Their thinking is that only once they have a sufficient number of contracts with the brokers and they get their brokers to develop a concept for them, because usually the brokers in Russia are brought on board very early on in the construction process to develop a future concept. So once they have a concept, once they have the brokers, their problems are solved. I think this is a challenge that we are all facing, because today external property management companies, their greatest problem is the property owners, not their competition. Thank you very much for this highly interesting information.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have Georgiy. Georgiy Naidyonov. He's not here. Oh, I was told that somebody would not come. Stefan Eberhard. Stefan Eberhard is from Vienna, the secret cultural capital of all German speakers, with a lot of art and a lot of history. The Austrian emperors were emperors of the German Empire for almost 1,000 years. We should not forget that. And we have a lot of ties in between. And he will speak about real estate transactions in Austria for third countries, investors, how to acquire and how to hold legal, tax, and structural aspects. To mention one thing, most of you heard yesterday Mr. De Soto. And it was very exciting for me to listen and to, I think, to understand that what we do here in the World Council aspect of managers is exactly fitting in his proposals. More than ever, I'm motivated to go on. Please.
So thank you very much for this kind introduction. So I rather have to speak about the more boring legal perspective and not the cultural one. I'm very sorry. So indeed, I will give you some annotations about old Europe, more exactly Austria, and with regard to real estate transactions in Austria, especially for the third countries investors. So as far as I'm concerned, my name is Stefan Eberhardt. As Mr. President already said, I'm heading the legal real estate department in a central European law firm called Lansky, Ganske & Partner. So to begin my short presentation, I just want to give you some words about the developments in the last year with regard to the Austrian real estate market. We can say that with regard to commercial real estate market, we had quite a stable but more or less moderate development. The investment volume in 2011, for example, was approximately 1.7 billion. As we heard from other speakers in the last days, we also have to face new challenges, in particular financing issues, financing matters and refinancing. Decreasing rents is another one. So we would in particular with regard to older buildings, Vienna is also famous for, we can see a less demand. Residential property, this is quite a prosperous market. It was over the last years, and it's still highly attractive. There are various reasons for this. One main reason is that we have a lot of clients who appreciate life quality, and we have a very high increase of growing population to be expected in the next years. And due to crisis circumstances in Europe, as we already heard, there is also the inflation fear. With regard to hotels, we have a tremendous increase in the markets. Retail property, we can just summarize that the international benchmark is not reached yet. So let me give you some input on how to acquire. I just want to grab out in a very simplified way some potential investment structures with regard to certain restrictions for acquisition of real estate in Austria, especially for third countries investors. Just look at the holding structure, the second from the right, and keep it in mind. So in Austria, we have some laws in each of the 9 federal countries governing the acquisition of properties by non-EU and EEA foreigners. So usually they are required to get a permit from the competent authorities. What we do in our law firm, we offer specially designed investment solutions, for example, using such a aforementioned holding structure, which leads to a solution that the competent authorities do not apply the restrictions to companies if majority shareholder is a foreign-controlled Austrian or EU, EEA company, for example in Cyprus. Overall, we can say for the acquisition, we have a estimated 10% of the purchase price with regard to taxes, expenses, and charges for the disposal. One of it is the real estate transfer tax, but the general rate would be 2.5%. Nevertheless, it's possible under certain circumstances to avoid this tax by proper structuring. An example would be doing a certain share deal conception in existing structures. VAT, value-added tax, we can say that generally there is an exemption. However, the seller has the right to opt in, which means that the buyer will be entitled to reclaim the input tax. If the seller does not opt in with regard to VAT, he might run risk to be obliged to correct the already paid input tax from the former years. We have a general income tax rate of 25% with regard to corporations, so it's also the same for private foundations. Of course, depending on the certain investment structure we use, we might have different income tax regimes. So let me give you, in addition, some words on how to hold. One of the main notable acts in Austria we should have a look at when holding property is the Tenancy Act, because this act might also apply to business premises and not only apartment use, for example. The item is, if it's fully applicable, there might be a burden in shifting, for example, the operating costs to the lessee. If this law, if this Tenancy Act is only partially applicable, we have at least to apply from this law some restrictions for lease agreements with regard to termination. Of course, there are exceptions to this law. That's why lawyers are needed. Let's talk a bit about the green developments. In Austria, we have another act which says that the seller and the lessor will have to submit a certain energy performance certificate for every building. So we shouldn't forget this. It has to be done before. In case of condominium ownership, there are certain rules under another act which we have to apply for the distribution of the operating costs in particular. We have different regimes when holding property. With regard to income taxations, there are different types and categories of income, depending in particular on the fact if we are trading with property or we are only holding one property, for example. Of course, we have different methods of determination of the taxable income. However, there are some deductibilities, so in particular we have a lump sum allowance of a certain percentage of the taxable profit. So it's not everything bad with regard to tax. With regard to VAT, it's very similar to the aforementioned. The lessor can opt in again. However, VAT is compulsory for the apartment lease. When opting in, we have different tax rates depending on the use. For private use, it's 10%. The general tax rate is 20%. Property tax, we have in addition for holding the property, it's 9%. It's 1% from the unit value, Einheitswert. Usually it's a bit lower than the market value. So now let's come to a very interesting point. What can we deduct from our tax basis with regard to maintenance, improvement, and rebuilding? Maintenance costs, we can say in principle, they are immediately deductible. The improvement costs, there it depends on the type of investment in a residential property and privately held property. We have to deduct it over the 10 years period. In case of investment in business property leased and commercially used, it's immediately deductible again. With regard to rebuilding costs, they have to be capitalized and amortized over utilization periods. So as a result, we can conclude that meeting the legal and tax standards are in any case essential for real estate management. Let me close my short presentation with some words with regard to trends in the Austrian real estate market. So, of course, we heard it before. We have green building concepts, we have revitalizations, and especially the use of alternative energy resources. What we also heard before is that challenges we have to face, especially outside the core business, meaning optimizing asset management and operative property management. We can see transformation of office area to residential, and of course we have the financing issue, which remains one of the biggest challenges. So especially we can say with regard to residentials, a residential market, we have a high decreasing amount, also for luxury apartments by foreign investors. So please see this as an invitation to come to Vienna, and if you like it, then you might buy a property. So I only give you some words with regard to our company. So we are advising as a one-stop shop, especially for clients from Russia and the CIS region. We have an optimized best friends system in over 50 countries worldwide. And with regard to Austria, we have the largest CIS team with qualified Russian lawyers also. My colleague Anna Zeitlinger is heading it. If you want to hear more about this, due to the time frame, I invite you to today's afternoon marketing session, and we can talk a bit more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You see, it was not his goal, certainly not, to make experts in specific Austrian laws and behavings and getting into the market and keeping property in the Austrian market. His advice will be there. But what I think is very important for the World Council of Managers is to have another example how different things are managed politically wise, tax wise, behavior wise from country to country. And how important it would be to have some kind of encyclopedia of knowledge for all the countries, and especially what I was discussing with Ronald, and I think we are going on with this discussion. What are the questions you would not even dare to ask as you don't know that there might be a problem? And what are the answers you would not be given as the other one does not know that you don't know the evidence of his own surrounding? It's the not knowing on both sides. And to make that clear and to pull that out of the underground, the questions and the answers, the non-spoken questions and the non-given answers will be one of our goals. And as much as many of you who would like to participate in that work, it's a real challenge, and it will take longer than our lifespan. And I think we have the next one. This is Boris. Are you going to speak in Russian or in English? Then give some of us the time to get the translation. I was not prepared that we have translation. I'm very happy we do. So let's make a break of 3 minutes for those who need the ear clubs to get them.
Спасибо. Добрый день, коллеги.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Mikhail. My presentation today is going to tie up very well with what Togrul Gonden said. We had a discussion before. I'm going to talk about the trends and perspectives of the development of property management companies in Russia. A lot of things that I wanted to say have already been said, so I would like to elaborate on what has already been said. And my presentation was prepared in such a way that we tried to make a comparison between what is happening in Europe and what is happening in Russia, globally and in Moscow and St. Petersburg specifically. Our company is part of the CBRI company, so we can draw upon the experiences of our colleagues in Europe, in Moscow, and from our experiences here in St. Petersburg. Maris Properties manages several office buildings in St. Petersburg. So the topic of my presentation is professional craving. And jumping ahead, I'd like to say that the main trend in the market of these services, is that it is becoming more and more professional. I'll skip a few of the theoretical slides. I'm not going to tell you what the property management is all about, but let me just stop here. I think it is important for you to understand the current situation in St. Petersburg, what's happening with the owners, with the various players in the market. So what is it that we do in this market? There is asset management. What is asset management? It's a long-term strategy, the management of the overall assets, property, money. It's a long-term strategy, as I said. Property management is a different type of management. This is management of your income and expenses. And this is the type of cooperation with the owner when the property management company takes care of all the income generation activities and all the expenses. And finally, facility management includes cleaning, security, the reception service, everything that has to do with expenses. So this is a pyramid of management types, and it shows the degree of involvement of the property owner. And this is very important for us when we participate in various competitive bids, when we talk to owners. We're trying to explain every time what kind of service we are trying to offer. we're trying to explain the difference between what the owner expects to have and what we can offer. The difference for the owner is mainly in the degree of his involvement. So when we say that our company is going to do asset management, then the owner does not have to be involved in all the particulars. However, when the company only takes care of the facility management, then the owner has to be involved in a lot of different activities, because everything else outside the facility management, including accounting, income generation and accounting for that, that's what the owner is supposed to do. So all these three different types of management differs in the degree of trust, the trust that owners give to management companies. You already heard that there is a great lack of trust on the part of owners. To a large degree, this is the main reason of what is happening in the market. This defines the market to date. And this is the current status based on the data we were able to collect in Europe, in Moscow and in St. Petersburg. You have already heard today that in Europe, over 50% of all the properties, and of course I include here office, shopping and warehouse property, is managed by property management companies. It is being outsourced to specialized property management companies. I'm talking about property management, not asset management here. In Moscow, only 5% of real estate is managed by such companies. In order to better understand the situation in Moscow, I can say that, according to our information, we're talking about 21 million square meters. So 5% is a very, very small share. In St. Petersburg, this percentage is even lower. In St. Petersburg, we have approximately 7 million square meters of office, shopping and warehouse property. And out of this amount, I think we only have the Galleria shopping center that is being managed by a professional company. That's the only example of a high-class shopping center being managed by an external property management company. We heard a lot of reasons for what is happening in the market, and you can observe the overall trend. The main trend in Europe, again, you heard about that earlier, is what the property management are trying to do, what their main focus is on: green development, green technologies, energy efficiency, trying to save on cutting expenses, standardization of services. Our colleagues in Europe try to standardize services by implementing software, specialized IT technologies. Property management companies use IT in order to monitor the situation with various properties they manage. Moscow is becoming more and more professional in terms of property management. We can see that a lot more time and effort is being spent on outsourcing professional services. However, in St. Petersburg, the overall trend is different. I would say that in St. Petersburg, we observe the trend of trying to cut expenses. That's it. So owners believe in cutting expenses. They want to save money. Here is an attempt on comparing the situations in Europe and in Russia. So in Europe, we can see a lot of companies that do property management, whereas in Russia, and that includes, of course, our company, which is capable of property management and asset management, but in most cases we do facility management mostly. we're talking about the technical operation of the building. This is something that owners understand. This is the amount of responsibility they are prepared to outsource, and they want to remain involved in other processes and in other activities. I would say this is the main difference today. On this slide, we tried to show you a ladder, the cycle. In Europe, the cycle lasts between 5 to 10 years. A developer builds a building, then a property management company operates the building, and then they sell it. Usually, when the building is sold, an external property management company comes in, because the building is usually sold to an institutional investor. In Russia, for various reasons, and Alexander named some of them, the majority of first generation, second generation properties are kept by original owners. There are very few institutional investors. And owners prefer to have their own affiliated management companies. And there's nothing bad about it. In fact, in order to make it clear to our foreign colleagues, I have to tell you that in St. Petersburg, we have some very strong management companies that can be called the pocket management companies. For example, we have a network of business centers called Senator, and all of these business centers are managed by the company that is affiliated with the owner, and they do a very good job of managing these business centers. On this slide, again, you can see a picture where we try to show what's happening in Europe and in Russia. So Europe is trying to put together a puzzle. So the company, the management company, interacts with the owner, with the capital, with the service providers. Russia has a different type of puzzle. IT is not involved, or at least very rarely is used. Professional service providers are very few and far between, and the whole interaction is between the owner and his money and the real estate, the capital. And again, this is a schematic of the process that we can observe in St. Petersburg, Moscow, and Europe. In St. Petersburg, the main focus is on cutting expenses. In Moscow, the focus is on quality. In Europe, the focus is on resource management and environment, energy efficiency. These are the main players in the Russian market today. Once again, I would like to emphasize that these are the only companies that are present in the Russian market and are prepared to offer the services in the area of asset management, property management, and facility management. We can see Jones Lang LaSalle, Cushman Wakefield, etc. There are local companies here in the market, St. Petersburg-based companies, Pikar and YNB. But here I named those that are known outside St. Petersburg as well. Our colleagues in London provided us with this picture. It's approximately the same with the previous one, with a few exceptions. These are the main players in the market. That excludes the local players, of course. And in conclusion, I would like to say a few words about our goal. What are the factors that contribute to the success of property management companies in Russia? There are external factors and internal factors. Internal factors is something that every management company should focus on, improving the quality of their staff, expanding and developing experience, improving the efficiency, using modern technologies and models. And external factors include the improvement of investment climate in Russia, the growth of investment agreements, training. I would like to focus on training for a few moments. You have to understand that in the 1990s and the beginning of the 21st century, the professional educational system, the vocational system of education collapsed. It was destroyed. And so a lot of our colleagues know that we have to hire technical staff, not only engineers in our company, but also technicians. So I can tell you that this is one of the biggest problems in Russia today. The vocational training system is in ruins for various reasons, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. The situation is exacerbated by the fact that we can see new modern technologies developing. We receive new materials and equipment, and they require a certain degree of training on the part of personnel. We need trained staff, and there are very few technicians who are capable of operating such machinery, of operating such equipment and using such technologies. So I'd like to pay your attention to the fact that, yes, indeed, there are training programs for training managers. We heard about such programs a bit earlier. But the vocational training system, unfortunately, in Russia remains a big problem. And finally, legislation. It's the same story all over again. There's a big difference between the regulations that govern the management process in Europe and the US and the documents and regulations that are used in Russia. I'm not going to go into too much detail again, but there is room for improvement. That seems to be it. Let me, in conclusion, say that the overall trend is to increase the number of external management companies. We can see that their number is growing, and I don't want to put the blame on the owners alone. We have to accept what we have. We have to accept that the situation in Russia is such that owners prefer to manage their property on their own. They prefer to hire staff, to have affiliated companies, because they trust them more. But at the same time, there's no other way. We will follow the lead of Moscow. We will follow in the footsteps of Europe. We will move towards the outsourcing of such services. We just have to, we need more time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this highly interesting information.
Dear friends, in Germany, there's a calling that they call me Mr. Condominium, as condominiums are my favorites. But you can see that the World Council of Managers is also interested in the other sectors of managing real estate. And we are developing information and crisscross information, which is the main thing for all the different sectors. But let me say one thing still before conclusion about the sector of the condominiums. In Western Europe, we have actually more than 45 million owners of condominiums. This is more than the whole population of Benelux and almost 4 times the population of Switzerland. Every single is owner of condominium, and everybody has a management problem, sooner or later. There are about at least in France, Germany, Italy, and Spain, that's just the countries I know a little bit the figures, there are more than 50,000 condominium owner managers. Just to tell you the amount and the movement, in Singapore, 80% of all high-rises are condominiums. And the largest condominium in this world is not any longer in the northern hemisphere, but in Sao Paulo, with more than 20,000 people living in one big building. So this is one sector. I know it's my hobby, it's my profession, but I just wanted to mention it, that it must not be forgotten in this forum. Are there any questions to the... Thank you very much, all of you, with your contributions. It was very interesting. You made me learn a lot. Thank you very much for your information. Thank you very much for you listening. But now it's open for you. It's forum. It's not monologue. It's dialogue. So if there are any questions from your side, please be so free and ask any of these gentlemen. Please. Oh, you get mine. Oh, she has one.
Can I ask you some idea on your compensation, and if there is any relation in between your compensation and the saving in gas and oil, or the saving on expenses in the long period?
Who would?
Now, does it work? Yeah. I'm afraid I will not get figures, but our compensation is usually based on NOI. This is what we prefer, because it creates a win-win situation and builds this trust which is missing. Especially in Russia, we talked a lot about trust to outsourcing companies. If you go with a fixed fee, it doesn't build trust, because you perform not good, but you still get the same fee. It doesn't sound right. So what we, in 90% of the cases, what we propose to our clients is a NOI-based fee. We even go with incentive fees, where we say when we surpass a certain threshold, a certain level of NOI, then we will get certain, fee above that. But mainly NOI-based.
Thank you very much. For those who are not member of the European community among you, just an information. It's a law all across European community, a law, that every owner of a residential building or a owner of a condominium, partner in a condominium, has to inform all kinds of tenants about the energy situation of the building. This is a big, big thing. So about 100 millions of houses and buildings, multiple, of course, not the simple houses, but multiple houses where more than 2 people live in, have to have an improvement of the energy situation for the last 3 years, and there's even a severe punishment if you don't. So, now, next question, please.
Thank you. During the presentation, I know you gave some figures about percentage paid as tax for transfer of property. I couldn't just get the exact figure. What is the percentage of tax?
Where?
In terms of, in Russia, in terms of percentage of the purchase price or value that you pay to government before you can register your title where you purchase the property. Get the question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would you answer? Who answers? I think that includes the question first. Can you really purchase land in Russia?
Это наводящий вопрос.
This is a leading question, really. Let me tell you that in Russia you can purchase land, but not everywhere around Russia can you do it.
В России, к сожалению,
Unfortunately, the taxes are not the same as in Europe here. You pay a certain tax percentage, you don't pay a certain percentage of the transaction amount. There is a different system of calculating the tax, so there is no straightforward answer to your question, how much is paid to the government. However, there are two main taxes involved here in the purchasing process, or rather in the selling process, because most taxes are usually imposed on the seller. There is the income tax and there is the value-added tax, the two taxes. So the income tax is the difference between the price of purchase, price of acquisition and the price of purchase, and the price of sale. And the VAT tax is 18% of the difference. This is the difference between the purchasing price and the selling price. There is no obvious answer to the question, really, because there is also the deduction system in place. So this is not really as straightforward as it seems. I know that in Europe, if you buy something, you pay a certain percentage when you buy real estate, and then you pay an annual percentage in the form of property tax. The rate of property tax in Russia is about 2%, not of the market value, but of what we call the cadastral value of the property. I would imagine that one would need a professional tax advisor who specializes in Russian taxation to really figure this out, and this is why we have a proliferation of auditing companies and consulting companies in the Russian market, and this is what creates so many challenges for the potential foreign investors. Whenever a foreign investor comes to us and says, how much profit will this venture bring, the first several meetings are usually spent educating the potential investor on Russian taxation, as well as the legal framework that Russia has, its civil code, and so on and so forth. So this is one of the reasons why foreign investors will usually buy property that is 100% complete, rather than getting involved in greenfield construction or buying unfinished property, because there are additional tax ramifications involved here. So I would say that it would be impossible to invest into a semi-finished property in Russia if you're a foreign investor and you don't have a Russian partner who knows the nuts and bolts of the system. Again, there's a lot of effort being expended on simplifying the taxation system in Russia, but these efforts have not been largely successful so far. Thank you.
See, it's just one answer, and it should be, we could talk about this much longer. As for example, if you compare to Europe, as you told, there is not Europe. There's, for example, Switzerland, where you cannot purchase any kind of property without a very special permission. And we have one booth here in our exposition here on FIABCI, where there's a gentleman, and he proposes in Switzerland real estate property at a very special price. Don't overlook the zeros, the lot of zeros in the price. And that is one of the rare exceptions in Switzerland where you can purchase something. In other countries, it depends how and what, and it's very difficult. We have more than 30 countries in Europe, in Western Europe, and I think at least we have 30 different legal situations. That is why, once more, it's so important that we exchange on the World Council of Management the multitude of information, and it will take quite a while. But anyway, thank you very much for your information. Is there any further question? I would like to close after the next question, so you would have time.
Можно я еще откомментирую вот предыдущий?
Can I throw in one additional comment, just piggybacking on the question, what the most widespread purchasing mechanism for foreign investors is? You usually create an SPV, a special company that will own this property alone without pursuing any other activities. So it's a special purpose vehicle focused on this property only. The foreign investor will buy shares 100% of shares in that SPV. This does not generate any additional taxes. Additional taxes will only arise when the investor wants to sell that property as part of their exit strategy. This is the most convenient, the most straightforward mechanism. It is also good for the owners because there are certain favorable rules for the sellers of property also. This is the most common mechanism.
Ladies and gentlemen, that beside the purchase tax, you might have the property tax every year. And the property tax in different countries is extremely different. In between my home in Germany and my home in Canada, the property tax is 1 to 20. So you see, we have much more information to give to somebody who is really looking for something. Purchase tax might be very low. If property tax later on eats up all his fun, then he has a new situation. On the other hand, some countries where income tax is low, property tax is high, and reverse. All this are the questions he does not ask. He's happy to see a low rate of purchase tax on property, jumps into it, and forgets about the property tax he has to pay every year. The property tax might even be higher than the purchase tax sometimes. So you have to have the whole picture. And the whole picture is something we have to elaborate. And I invite everybody of you to participate in this long way. Let's undertake it. And now let's have lunch. Thank you very much.